What if I told you there's a plant growing in your backyard right now that ancient civilizations used to treat conditions that still stump doctors today? And no, I'm not talking about some miracle cure scam. I'm talking about real, scientifically studied plants that address problems modern medicine often overlooks, or worse, masks with pills that create more problems than they solve. Here's the thing. We've spent the last century running toward synthetic solutions while running away from the remedies that kept humanity alive for thousands of years. And somewhere along the way, we forgot something important. Nature wasn't just our first pharmacy. In many cases, it's still our best one. This one tip might change your life, but that's just the start. Subscribe to take control of your health. Today, we're diving deep into 20 medicinal plants that heal what modern medicine misses. These aren't random herbs pulled from some dusty folklore book. These are plants backed by clinical research, used in hospitals around the world, and yet somehow still overlooked by mainstream medicine in the West. Think about this. You go to the doctor with chronic fatigue, and they run some tests, shrug, and tell you everything looks normal. You're exhausted, you can barely function, but according to the numbers, you're fine. Or maybe you're dealing with digestive issues that don't quite fit into any diagnosis, or brain fog that makes every day feel like you're thinking through molasses, or anxiety that isn't severe enough for medication but is severe enough to affect your quality of life. Modern medicine doesn't have great answers for these in-between problems, but traditional medicine has been addressing them for thousands of years. Some of these plants target inflammation in ways that anti-inflammatories can't. Others support your nervous system without the side effects of anxiety medications. And a few of them, they work on problems that doctors will tell you there's no real treatment for. But here's where it gets interesting. The pharmaceutical industry knows about these plants. They've been studying them for decades, and in some cases, they've tried to patent synthetic versions of what nature already provides for free. They've extracted single compounds, modified them slightly to get patent protection, and sold them back to us at 1,000% markup. The question is, why don't more people know about this? The answer involves money, medical education, and a healthcare system that's better at treating disease than promoting wellness. But we don't have to wait for the system to change. We can educate ourselves right now. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll have a completely different perspective on healing. And plant number 17, it's going to shock you. I'm not being dramatic. When I learned about the research on that one, I actually had to double-check that I was reading it correctly. Let's start at the beginning. You know that feeling when you're tired but wired? When you're exhausted to your bones but your brain just won't stop racing? When you wake up at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding for absolutely no reason. Modern medicine has a name for this. They call it anxiety or stress, and they hand you a prescription for something that makes you feel like a zombie. But here's what they don't tell you. That wired but tired feeling? It's your adrenal glands crying for help. It's cortisol flooding your system when it shouldn't be. And there's a plant that's been addressing this exact problem for 3,000 years. Ashwagandha. The name literally means smell of horse in Sanskrit, which sounds terrible until you realize it's actually a compliment. Ancient healers believed this root gave you the strength and vitality of a stallion. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ancient beliefs don't mean much in the modern world. Fair point. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2012, researchers conducted a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, the gold standard of medical research, on people with chronic stress. The group taking ashwagandha showed a 28% reduction in cortisol levels. 28%. That's not a minor improvement. That's a fundamental shift in how your stress response operates. But what really sets ashwagandha apart is what it does that pharmaceuticals can't. See, when you take an anti-anxiety medication, it typically works by sedating your nervous system. It's like putting a lid on a boiling pot. The pressure's still building, you just can't feel it as much. Ashwagandha works differently. It's what's called an adaptogen, meaning it helps your body adapt to stress rather than just suppressing the symptoms. One study found that people taking ashwagandha for 60 days showed improvements in memory and cognitive function, something you definitely won't get from most anxiety medications, which often cause brain fog as a side effect. Here's something else the research shows. Ashwagandha appears to support healthy thyroid function, which is often implicated in fatigue and stress intolerance. It may help regulate testosterone levels, which decline under chronic stress, and it seems to lower blood sugar and reduce markers of inflammation throughout the body. In other words, it's not just fixing one thing, it's addressing the entire cascade of dysfunction that chronic stress creates. That's something a single-target pharmaceutical simply can't do. And here's the part that gets personal for me. I talked to a naturopathic doctor last year who told me that ashwagandha is one of the few herbs she recommends to people coming off prescription anxiety medications. Not as a replacement, never do that without professional guidance, but as support during the transition. She said it helps smooth out the edges in a way that makes the process less brutal. She also mentioned something interesting. Many of her patients who take ashwagandha report that they handle daily stressors better. They don't snap at their kids as quickly. They don't lie awake at night replaying conversations. They feel more resilient. And that's exactly what an adaptogen is supposed to do, build resilience. The typical dose ranges from 300 to 600 milligrams of a standardized extract taken once or twice daily. It's best taken consistently over weeks or months to see full effects. Some people take it in the morning for energy support. Others take it at night for sleep support. It seems to work for both, which tells you something about how intelligently it interacts with body systems. But ashwagandha is just the beginning. Because while it's working on your stress response, there's another plant that's tackling something even more fundamental. Let me ask you something. How many people do you know who live with chronic pain? Back pain, joint pain, headaches that never quite go away, gut issues that doctors can't explain? Here's a number that might surprise you. According to the CDC, over 50 million Americans live with chronic pain. 50 million? That's more than the population of California. And the standard medical response? NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, which can tear up your stomach lining, or opioids, which, well, we all know how that story ends. But there's a golden spice that's been fighting inflammation for 4,000 years in India, and modern science is finally catching up to what Ayurvedic practitioners always knew. Turmeric, specifically, the active compound inside it called curcumin. Now, you've probably heard of turmeric before. Maybe you've even bought some golden milk lattes. But here's what most people don't understand. Turmeric doesn't just reduce inflammation, it works through mechanisms that most anti-inflammatory drugs can't touch. A study published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine compared curcumin to diclofenac, a powerful prescription anti-inflammatory, in patients with knee osteoarthritis. The results? Curcumin worked just as well as the drug, but without the cardiovascular and gastrointestinal side effects that come with long-term NSAID use. But here's where it gets really interesting. Curcumin doesn't just block inflammatory enzymes like pharmaceuticals do. It actually modulates your immune system's inflammatory response at the genetic level. It influences something called NF-kappa B, which is like the master switch for inflammation in your body. I want you to think about that for a second. A plant compound that talks directly to your genes about how to handle inflammation. That's not folk medicine. That's cutting-edge molecular biology happening in a root that costs $3 at the grocery store. There's more. Curcumin has been studied for depression, and the results are genuinely surprising. A study comparing curcumin to Prozac found that curcumin was as effective as the antidepressant for treating major depressive disorder. And here's the kicker. Patients who took both curcumin and Prozac together showed the best outcomes of all. This suggests curcumin isn't just treating symptoms, it's working through different mechanisms that complement pharmaceutical approaches. Researchers believe curcumin's antidepressant effects come partly from its anti-inflammatory action. There's growing evidence that chronic inflammation plays a role in depression, and partly from its ability to increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the growth of new neurons. There's a catch, though. Curcumin on its own has terrible bioavailability. Your body can barely absorb it. That's why traditional Indian cooking always combines turmeric with black pepper and fat. The pepper contains piperine, which increases curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. 2,000. Your ancestors figured this out through trial and error. Scientists figured it out in labs in the 1990s. Modern supplements often include piperine or use specialized delivery systems like liposomal encapsulation or nanoparticle formulations to improve absorption. If you're serious about using turmeric therapeutically, don't just shake some powder into your smoothie and call it a day. Make sure you're using a form your body can actually utilize. But while turmeric is putting out fires in your body, there's another plant working on something equally important that doctors rarely test for. Here's something that might change how you think about your health. Your liver performs over 500 functions every single day. It filters your blood, metabolizes medications, produces bile for digestion, stores vitamins, regulates cholesterol, and detoxifies basically everything that enters your body. And here's the scary part. Most people's livers are struggling, and they have no idea. The rise in fatty liver disease has been called a silent epidemic by researchers. Some estimates suggest that up to 30% of adults in Western countries have some degree of fatty liver, often without any symptoms. And modern medicine's approach? Mostly just wait and see. Maybe lose some weight. Come back in a year. Enter milk thistle. This purple-flowered plant has been used to support liver health since the time of the ancient Greeks. And the active compound, silymarin, is so effective that it's actually used in emergency rooms to treat death cap mushroom poisoning, one of the most deadly toxins known to humanity. Think about that. When someone eats a mushroom that destroys liver cells, doctors reach for a plant compound, not a synthetic drug. A plant compound. Studies have shown that silymarin can regenerate liver cells, protect against oxidative damage, and reduce inflammation in liver tissue. One meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials found that milk thistle significantly improved liver enzyme levels in patients with liver disease. But here's what really gets me. How many people do you know who take regular medications? Blood pressure pills, statins, antidepressants, pain relievers? All of these put stress on your liver. And yet, how many doctors recommend liver support alongside those prescriptions? Almost none. Because liver support isn't part of the pharmaceutical playbook. It's not profitable. It's just prevention. And prevention doesn't bill well. A friend of mine, and I'm not making this up, was taking 7 different medications and had no idea why he was feeling so exhausted and foggy. His doctor ran some tests, found elevated liver enzymes, and suggested cutting back on the medications. But nobody mentioned that there might be a plant that could help support his liver while it processed all those drugs. He found out about milk thistle on his own. 3 months later, his liver enzymes had normalized. His doctor was surprised. My friend wasn't. The standard dose of milk thistle is typically 200 to 400 milligrams of an extract standardized to contain 70 to 80% silymarin, taken 2 to 3 times daily. It's considered very safe, even at higher doses, which makes sense when you consider it's been used for thousands of years without major problems being recorded. Here's a thought that occurred to me while researching milk thistle. We live in a toxic world. Pesticides on our food, chemicals in our water, air pollution, alcohol, medications. Our livers are working overtime just to keep up with modern living. And yet there's almost no conversation in mainstream medicine about supporting the organ that does all this work. It's like owning a car and never changing the oil, then acting surprised when the engine fails. Like this video and comment plants if you love medicinal plants. Let's build a community here of people who actually care about real health. Now, milk thistle works on detoxification, but there's another overlooked problem that affects even more people. How's your sleep? And I mean, really, not just the number of hours you spend in bed, but the quality of that sleep. The deep, restorative, wake-up feeling human kind of sleep. Because if you're like most adults, the answer is probably not great. The sleep industry is worth over $70 billion. $70 billion. And that includes everything from memory foam mattresses to prescription sleep aids like Ambien, which, by the way, can cause side effects including sleepwalking, sleep driving, and having full conversations you don't remember. Sounds restful, right? But here's the thing. Humans have dealt with sleeplessness for thousands of years. And before we had pharmaceuticals that knocked you unconscious while potentially making you cook a meal in your sleep, we had valerian root. This plant has been used as a sleep aid since at least ancient Greece. Hippocrates himself wrote about its calming properties, and modern research shows there's real science behind the folklore. Valerian works primarily on GABA receptors, the same neurotransmitter system that benzodiazepines target. But instead of hammering those receptors into submission like a drug does, valerian provides a gentler modulation. It's the difference between getting hit with a tranquilizer dart and settling into a warm bath. A systematic review of 16 studies found that valerian improved subjective sleep quality without producing the morning grogginess that comes with most sleep medications. Participants reported falling asleep faster, sleeping more deeply, and feeling more rested upon waking. But here's what I find really compelling. Unlike prescription sleep aids, valerian doesn't appear to disrupt your natural sleep architecture. It doesn't suppress REM sleep or leave you dependent on it to fall asleep. It just helps. I had a conversation with a sleep specialist once, an actual MD who runs a sleep clinic, and she told me something that stuck with me. She said that most of her patients don't actually have sleep disorders. They have stress disorders that show up at night. And for those patients, she often recommends trying valerian before moving to prescriptions. The pharmaceutical approach, she said, is like using a sledgehammer when you might just need a tap on the shoulder. That's what valerian is. A gentle tap on the shoulder that reminds your nervous system how to do what it already knows how to do: rest. Here are some practical notes on using valerian. It works best when taken consistently over several weeks, though some people notice effects from the first dose. The typical dose is 300 to 600 milligrams of root extract, taken 30 minutes to 2 hours before bed. It has a very distinctive smell. Some describe it as dirty socks or old cheese, so capsules are often more palatable than teas or tinctures. One thing I should mention: a small percentage of people experience the opposite effect from valerian. Instead of calming them, it makes them feel more alert or even anxious. This is thought to be a genetic variation in how people metabolize the compounds. If that happens to you, it doesn't mean valerian is bad. It just means it's not the right herb for your particular body chemistry. There are plenty of other options. Also, valerian can interact with sedative medications, including prescription sleep aids, benzodiazepines, and some antidepressants. If you're on any of these, talk to a healthcare provider before adding valerian. But sleep is only half the equation. What about focus? What about mental clarity? Because there's a plant that's been enhancing cognitive function for longer than written history. I want you to consider something extraordinary. The ginkgo tree has been around for over 200 million years. It watched the dinosaurs come and go. It survived ice ages, meteor strikes, and geological upheavals that wiped out most other plant species. The oldest living ginkgo tree is estimated to be over 3,000 years old. This is not a fragile plant. This is a survivor. And the compound in its leaves appears to help our brains survive too. Ginkgo biloba works primarily by improving blood flow to the brain. It contains flavonoids and terpenoids that dilate blood vessels and reduce the stickiness of platelets. More blood to the brain means more oxygen, more nutrients, and better waste removal from neural tissue. In Germany, ginkgo is an approved treatment for dementia and cognitive decline. Doctors prescribe it, insurance covers it, it's part of standard medical practice. But in the United States, it's just another supplement gathering dust on pharmacy shelves with little acknowledgement from mainstream medicine. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease looked at studies involving over 2,000 patients and found that ginkgo extract significantly improved cognitive function and daily living activities in people with dementia. The effect size was comparable to prescription drugs like donepezil, but with a better safety profile. Now, I want to be careful here. Ginkgo isn't a miracle cure for Alzheimer's or dementia. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But the research suggests it can be a valuable part of a brain health strategy, particularly for age-related cognitive decline that doesn't meet the threshold for a diagnosis. And here's what frustrates me. Most doctors won't mention ginkgo to their patients with mild memory complaints. They'll wait until the problem is severe enough for medication. But why wait? Why not support brain health before it becomes brain disease? I think you're starting to see a pattern here. Modern medicine is excellent at crisis intervention. It's less interested in prevention and support. And that's where these plants come in. One more thing about ginkgo worth mentioning. It has blood-thinning properties, which is part of how it improves circulation. But this means it can interact with blood thinners like warfarin, aspirin, and other anticoagulants. If you're on any of these medications or if you're planning surgery, you need to be aware of this interaction. For most people, though, ginkgo is remarkably safe. It's been used by millions of people for decades, particularly in Europe and Asia. The typical dose is 120 to 240 milligrams of standardized extract daily, usually divided into 2 or 3 doses. Some researchers suggest that ginkgo might be most effective when started early, before significant cognitive decline has occurred. It may be better at maintaining function than restoring function that's already lost, which makes sense when you think about it. It's easier to keep a building standing than to rebuild one that's already crumbled. But we're just getting started, because the next 5 plants tackle problems that are even more commonly overlooked. Okay, let's talk about something that affects almost everyone but nobody takes seriously: fatigue. Not the kind of tiredness that a good night's sleep fixes. I'm talking about the bone-deep exhaustion that makes even simple tasks feel impossible. The kind where you've slept 8 hours and still feel like you've been hit by a truck. What does modern medicine offer for this? Usually a blood test that comes back normal, a shrug, and maybe a suggestion that you're stressed or depressed. And look, sometimes that's true, but sometimes there's something else going on that standard tests don't catch. Rhodiola rosea has been used in traditional medicine in Russia, Scandinavia, and Tibet for centuries. In fact, it was a closely guarded secret of Soviet athletes and cosmonauts during the Cold War. They used it to enhance physical and mental performance under extreme conditions. And the research suggests they were onto something. What makes rhodiola different from stimulants like caffeine is how it works. It doesn't amp up your nervous system. Instead, it helps your cells produce energy more efficiently by supporting mitochondrial function. It's like upgrading your engine rather than just stepping on the gas. A study on physicians doing night shifts, not exactly a low-stress job, found that rhodiola reduced mental fatigue and improved cognitive function even when they were sleep-deprived. Another study on students during exam periods showed improved mental clarity and reduced anxiety. But here's the part that resonated with me personally. Rhodiola seems to specifically help with what researchers call burnout-related fatigue. That's the exhaustion that comes from chronic stress, from pushing through when your body is telling you to stop. It's the price we pay for the modern lifestyle. And the medical system's response to burnout, usually more demands, less rest, and a prescription that treats symptoms without addressing causes. Rhodiola offers something different: actual support for overtaxed systems. I want to share something interesting about how rhodiola compares to other approaches. A study looked at participants with stress-related fatigue and compared rhodiola extract to placebo over 4 weeks. The rhodiola group showed significant improvements in fatigue symptoms starting at just 1 week. By 4 weeks, they showed improvements in concentration, decreased cortisol response, and better performance on stress-related tasks. Here's what stands out to me about that study. It wasn't just that people felt better, though they did. Their bodies were actually handling stress more efficiently. Lower cortisol awakening response. Better heart rate variability. These are objective measures, not just self-reported feelings. The typical dose of rhodiola ranges from 200 to 600 milligrams of standardized extract, typically taken in the morning or early afternoon. Because it can be slightly stimulating for some people, it's generally not recommended close to bedtime. Some practitioners use rhodiola in combination with ashwagandha. Both are adaptogens, but they have slightly different effects. Rhodiola tends to be more stimulating and is often preferred for fatigue and mental performance. Ashwagandha tends to be more calming and is often preferred for anxiety and sleep issues. Using both together can provide comprehensive adaptogenic support. But if rhodiola is about energy, the next plant is about something even more fundamental to how we feel. I'm going to tread carefully here because mental health is serious business. If you're dealing with clinical depression, you need professional help. This video is not medical advice. Got it? Good. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough. The difference between clinical depression and the milder mood issues that most people experience. Feeling down, lacking motivation, not enjoying things you used to enjoy, these are common experiences. And for many people, they don't rise to the level of a clinical diagnosis. But that doesn't mean they don't matter. That doesn't mean you should just push through. St. John's wort has been used for mood support since ancient Greece. And unlike some herbal remedies, this one has been studied extensively. We're talking about over 30 randomized controlled trials involving thousands of patients. Here's what the research shows. For mild to moderate depression, not severe clinical depression, but the more common variety, St. John's wort performs as well as prescription antidepressants like Prozac and Zoloft. A systematic review published in the Cochrane database found that it was significantly more effective than placebo and equivalent to standard antidepressants with fewer side effects. In Germany, St. John's wort is prescribed more often than Prozac for depression. Doctors there trust it. Research supports it. Patients prefer it because it doesn't come with the sexual dysfunction, weight gain, and emotional blunting that SSR is often cause. But in America, your doctor might not even mention it, and if you bring it up, they might dismiss it as just an herb. Now, I need to give you a warning here. St. John's wort interacts with many medications, including birth control pills, blood thinners, and immunosuppressants. It can make those drugs less effective. This is not something to mess around with if you're on other medications. Always talk to a healthcare provider. But for the millions of people who struggle with low-level mood issues and don't want to jump straight to pharmaceuticals, this plant offers a legitimate, research-backed option that most doctors won't tell you about. How does St. John's wort work? Unlike SSRIs, which focus primarily on serotonin, St. John's wort appears to affect multiple neurotransmitter systems: serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. It's a broader approach that may explain why some people who don't respond well to single-target antidepressants do respond to this plant. The standard dose is typically 300 milligrams of an extract standardized to 0.3% hypericin, taken 3 times daily. It takes 4 to 6 weeks to reach full effect, similar to prescription antidepressants. If you don't notice improvement by 8 weeks, it's probably not the right intervention for you. One fascinating side note, St. John's wort has been used for centuries, not just for mood, but for wound healing and nerve pain. The name itself comes from St. John the Baptist. The plant traditionally blooms around his feast day in late June. Medieval monks called it chase devil because they believed it could ward off evil spirits. We'd now say those evil spirits were probably depression. And speaking of things that affect your mood, let's talk about something that's probably affecting you right now without you even realizing it. There's a temple herb in India that grandmothers plant at their doorways. They consider it sacred. They pray before it. They've been doing this for thousands of years. Turns out, those grandmothers were onto something. Holy basil, or tulsi, is called the incomparable one in Sanskrit. And while that might sound like marketing hype, the research is starting to back up the nickname. What makes Tulsi special is how comprehensively it works. It's not targeting just one system or one problem. It appears to modulate multiple stress response pathways simultaneously. Studies have shown effects on cortisol, blood sugar, inflammation, and even brain chemistry. A randomized, placebo-controlled trial found that Tulsi significantly reduced stress and anxiety scores in participants, while also improving sleep quality and overall well-being. Unlike pharmaceutical anxiolytics, it didn't cause sedation or cognitive impairment. But here's what really interests me about Tulsi. We're living in an age of what I'd call diffuse stress. It's not one big thing making us anxious. It's everything, all the time. The news cycle, social media, economic uncertainty, climate anxiety, the sense that the world is moving too fast and we can't keep up. Traditional medicine didn't have a category for this kind of stress. Neither does modern medicine, really. There's no pill for everything feels wrong, but I can't explain why. But adaptogens like Tulsi were designed, by nature or evolution or whatever you want to call it, to help organisms cope with environmental stress. That's literally what they do. They help your system adapt to whatever you're facing. I drink Tulsi tea most evenings now, not because any study told me to, but because I noticed something. On the days I drink it, the world feels slightly less like it's pressing in on me. The edges are softer. My thoughts are calmer. That's not a clinical claim. That's just my experience. But it's an experience that millions of people in India have been having for centuries. Maybe they know something we're just starting to learn. The typical form of Tulsi is tea, though capsules and liquid extracts are also available. Many people drink 2 to 3 cups of Tulsi tea daily. It has a pleasant, slightly spicy flavor that combines well with other herbs like ginger or lemongrass. In Ayurveda, Tulsi is considered a sattvich herb, one that promotes clarity, balance, and mental peace. It's often used in spiritual practices, which might sound woo-woo to Western ears, but there's something to the idea that what we consume affects not just our bodies, but our minds and spirits. Here's a practical consideration. Tulsi may have mild blood sugar lowering effects. If you're on diabetes medication, monitor your blood sugar carefully and talk to your healthcare provider. It may also have mild blood thinning effects, so the same cautions apply as with ginkgo. All right, we've talked about stress and mood, but there's a physical problem that affects even more people, and modern medicine has almost nothing useful to say about it. Oz, how's your gut? And I'm not being cute. I'm asking because digestive issues are one of the most common health complaints and one of the most poorly addressed by conventional medicine. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, affects somewhere between 10 and 15% of the population. That's 1 in 7 people walking around with bloating, cramping, alternating diarrhea, and constipation, and a general sense that their digestive system is at war with them. And what does modern medicine offer? Mostly a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning they rule out everything serious and then tell you there's nothing actually wrong, you just have IBS. Here's some fiber, maybe try yoga. Good luck. But there's a plant that's been calming digestive distress since ancient Egypt, and you probably have some in your kitchen right now. Peppermint oil, specifically in enteric-coated capsules that release in the intestines rather than the stomach, has been shown in multiple clinical trials to significantly reduce IBS symptoms. A meta-analysis of 9 studies found that peppermint oil was significantly more effective than placebo for overall symptom improvement. How does it work? Peppermint contains menthol, which has an antispasmodic effect on the smooth muscle of the intestines. It literally calms the cramping and spasming that causes so much of IBS's misery. It also appears to have antimicrobial properties that may help rebalance gut bacteria. But here's the kicker. Prescription medications for IBS often come with serious side effects. Some have been pulled from the market due to safety concerns. Meanwhile, peppermint has been used safely for millennia. It's so safe that it's in candy. I talked to a gastroenterologist once who admitted, off the record, that peppermint oil should be first-line treatment for IBS. But there's no profit in it, he said, so drug companies aren't going to promote it, and most doctors don't stay current on herbal research. That's the system we're dealing with. Not a conspiracy, exactly, just misaligned incentives. Some practical notes on using peppermint for IBS. The enteric coating on the capsules is important. It ensures the peppermint oil is released in the intestines where it's needed, rather than the stomach where it might cause heartburn. The typical dose is 1 to 2 capsules 2 to 3 times daily, taken 30 to 60 minutes before meals. For less severe digestive upset, peppermint tea can also be helpful. It won't deliver as concentrated a dose as the capsules, but many people find it soothing for occasional bloating, gas, or stomach discomfort. There are a few cautions. People with GERD or severe acid reflux might find that peppermint makes symptoms worse. It can relax the lower esophageal sphincter, allowing stomach acid to flow back up. If that's you, peppermint might not be the right choice. Also, peppermint essential oil should never be applied directly to the skin without dilution and should never be given to infants or very young children. Speaking of the gut, though, there's another plant that works on a related problem. Okay, this one is going to surprise you. Because ginger is so common, so ordinary, so much a part of everyday cooking that you might not even think of it as medicine, but it is. It absolutely is. Ginger's anti-nausea effects have been studied extensively, and the results are actually pretty embarrassing for pharmaceutical companies. In multiple trials, ginger has performed as well as or better than prescription anti-nausea medications, including for chemotherapy-induced nausea, one of the most difficult types to treat. A study of over 500 cancer patients found that ginger significantly reduced nausea when taken alongside standard anti-nausea medications. Another study on pregnant women, for whom medication options are limited, found that ginger was effective and safe for morning sickness. But it's not just nausea. Ginger has potent anti-inflammatory effects that rival some NSAIDs. It's been shown to reduce muscle soreness after exercise, ease osteoarthritis pain, and even reduce menstrual cramps. A study published in the Journal of Pain compared ginger to ibuprofen for menstrual pain. The result? They were equally effective, but only one of them erodes your stomach lining with long-term use. Hint, it's not the ginger. What's beautiful about ginger is its accessibility. You don't need a prescription. You don't need to find a special supplement store. You can walk into any grocery store and buy a knob of ginger for a couple of dollars. Grate it into tea when you feel nauseous. Add it to meals for its anti-inflammatory benefits. It's medicine that pretends to be food. Here's a tip from traditional Chinese medicine. Fresh ginger is considered more stimulating and warming, while dried ginger is considered more drying and better for digestive issues. For nausea, fresh ginger is typically preferred. For chronic inflammatory conditions, either form works. The research-supported dose for nausea is typically 1 to 1.5 grams of dried ginger, or about a teaspoon of fresh grated ginger, though some people find relief with less. For anti-inflammatory effects, higher doses, up to 4 grams daily, have been used in studies. One interesting application: some athletes use ginger for exercise-induced muscle soreness. A study found that daily ginger consumption reduced muscle pain after exercise by about 25%. That's not as dramatic as popping an ibuprofen, but it also doesn't carry the risks of chronic NSAID use. Pregnant women have used ginger for morning sickness for centuries, and the research supports its safety and effectiveness in pregnancy. But as with anything during pregnancy, it's wise to discuss with your healthcare provider first. And that's what I love about these plants. They're not exotic. They're not rare. They're not gatekept by the pharmaceutical industry. They're just there, waiting for you to use them. But wait, because we're only halfway through this list, and the plants coming up next tackle some of the most overlooked problems in modern health, including one that's secretly affecting your brain right now. Let me tell you about a plant that's been used in India to help students memorize sacred texts for over 3,000 years. a plant that Ayurvedic practitioners call Brahmi, after the Hindu god of creation. A plant that modern neuroscience is finally starting to understand. Bacopa monnieri works on memory and cognition, but not the way stimulants do. It doesn't give you a temporary boost that crashes later. Instead, research suggests it actually supports the structural integrity of neural tissue over time. Multiple randomized controlled trials have shown that Bacopa supplementation improves memory acquisition, retention, and recall. One 12-week study found significant improvements in attention, cognitive processing, and working memory compared to placebo. But here's what makes Bacopa different from any pharmaceutical cognitive enhancer. It appears to protect neurons from oxidative damage while also promoting the growth of new nerve endings. It's not just boosting performance, it's supporting the underlying hardware. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found that Bacopa significantly improved spatial learning and memory in subjects while also reducing anxiety. That's a combination you won't find in any prescription drug. Now, I need to be honest with you. Bacopa is a slow-burn herb. You're not going to take it once and suddenly remember where you left your keys. It takes weeks, sometimes months, of consistent use to see benefits. That's because it's not masking symptoms. It's actually changing neural function. In a world of instant gratification, that's a hard sell. But if you're playing the long game with your brain health, Bacopa deserves a serious look. And speaking of the long game, there's another plant that's been quietly fighting one of our biggest killers. Let's talk about your heart, the organ that beats 100,000 times a day, every day for your entire life. The one thing you literally cannot live without. Heart disease is still the #1 killer in the Western world. And while modern medicine has made incredible advances in emergency cardiac care, it's less impressive at prevention and at treating the early stages of heart dysfunction. Enter hawthorn. This thorny shrub has been used in European folk medicine for centuries, particularly for weak heart conditions. And the science is catching up. Hawthorn contains compounds that strengthen the contractile force of the heart muscle while also dilating blood vessels and reducing blood pressure. It's like a gym workout and a relaxation session for your cardiovascular system, all in one. A Cochrane review, that's a highly rigorous systematic review of medical evidence, found that hawthorn extract significantly improved symptoms and exercise tolerance in patients with chronic heart failure. The improvement was clinically meaningful and comparable to some prescription heart medications. But here's the thing that should make you sit up straight. Hawthorn's side effect profile is remarkably mild. We're talking about mild digestive upset in some people. Compare that to prescription heart medications, which can cause everything from chronic cough to kidney damage to life-threatening electrolyte imbalances. I spoke with a cardiologist in Germany where hawthorn is an approved treatment for early-stage heart failure, and he said something that stuck with me. In America, we wait until the heart is seriously damaged before we intervene aggressively. In Germany, we start supporting heart function much earlier. Hawthorn is part of that approach. Why the difference? It's the same story we keep seeing. Herbs don't have patent protection. Pharmaceutical companies can't make billions on them, so they don't get promoted, studied adequately, or integrated into mainstream practice. Your heart might be paying the price. Okay, let's shift gears, because there's a condition that affects millions of women, and modern medicine has basically nothing useful to say about it. If you're a woman who's ever struggled with PMS, irregular periods, or hormonal issues, I want you to pay close attention right now, because what I'm about to tell you could change your monthly experience. Vitex agnus castus, also known as chasteberry, has been used for hormonal balance in women since ancient Greece. Hippocrates recommended it. Medieval monks reportedly used it to reduce libido, hence the name chasteberry. But its real power lies in regulating the female reproductive system. Here's how it works. Vitex acts on the pituitary gland, which controls hormone production throughout the body. Specifically, it appears to increase the production of luteinizing hormone, while mildly inhibiting the release of follicle-stimulating hormone. The net effect is a shift in the estrogen to progesterone ratio that many women find beneficial. Studies have shown that Vitex can reduce PMS symptoms like breast tenderness, bloating, mood swings, and headaches. One 3-month trial found that over half of the women taking Vitex reported a 50% or greater reduction in PMS symptoms. But here's where it gets really interesting. Vitex has also been studied for fertility support, particularly in women with luteal phase defects, a condition where the second half of the menstrual cycle is too short for proper implantation. Several studies have shown improved pregnancy rates in women taking Vitex. Now, what does mainstream medicine offer for these issues? Hormonal birth control to override your natural cycle, pain relievers for cramps, antidepressants for mood symptoms, all of which have significant side effects and none of which address the underlying imbalance. Vitex isn't a quick fix. Like Bacopa, it needs time to work, usually 3 months or more to see full effects. But for women who want to work with their bodies rather than against them, it's a powerful option that most gynecologists never mention. And while we're talking about hormones, there's a condition that affects even more people, including men. Here's a scary statistic. Over 100 million Americans have diabetes or prediabetes. 100 million. That's nearly a third of the population with blood sugar issues. And while modern medicine is excellent at managing advanced diabetes with insulin and medications, it's much less impressive at preventing prediabetes from becoming full-blown diabetes. The standard advice: eat less, exercise more, lose weight, good luck. But there's a seed that's been used in traditional medicine for millennia that's showing remarkable effects on blood sugar regulation. Fenugreek is a staple in Indian and Middle Eastern cooking. It has a distinctive maple-like flavor and has been used medicinally for everything from digestive issues to lactation support. But the blood sugar research is particularly compelling. Multiple studies have shown that fenugreek can lower fasting blood glucose, improve glucose tolerance, and reduce HbA1c, the gold standard measure of long-term blood sugar control. One meta-analysis found that fenugreek significantly reduced fasting blood glucose and improved glucose tolerance across multiple trials. How does it work? Fenugreek seeds are incredibly high in soluble fiber, which slows sugar absorption from the digestive tract. They also contain compounds that appear to improve insulin sensitivity and stimulate insulin secretion. It's attacking the blood sugar problem from multiple angles. But here's what really gets me. For the 100 million Americans with blood sugar issues, how many have heard of fenugreek from their doctors? How many have been told there's a kitchen spice that might help keep them from developing full-blown diabetes? Almost none, because there's no fenugreek drug company sending representatives to doctors' offices. There are no fenugreek commercials during the evening news. There's just a cheap spice that works quietly and doesn't make anyone rich. I add fenugreek to my cooking regularly now, not because I have blood sugar issues, but because prevention beats treatment every time, and because it tastes good. Speaking of prevention, there's one more plant in this act that tackles something almost everyone deals with, but rarely talks about. I know the name sounds weird, but stick with me because slippery elm might be the most overlooked digestive remedy in existence. The inner bark of the slippery elm tree contains something called mucilage, a substance that becomes gel-like when mixed with water. When you consume it, this mucilage coats the lining of your digestive tract, creating a protective barrier against irritation. If you've ever dealt with acid reflux, gastritis, inflammatory bowel conditions, or just an angry, irritated gut, you know how miserable it is. And you probably also know that most medications either suppress acid production, which you actually need for digestion, or provide temporary relief that wears off quickly. Slippery elm works differently. Instead of suppressing normal function, it provides a physical barrier that allows healing to occur. It's like putting a bandage on the inside of your digestive tract. The research is still catching up to traditional use, but preliminary studies are promising. One clinical trial found that slippery elm, combined with other herbs, significantly improved symptoms in patients with irritable bowel syndrome. It's been used traditionally for everything from sore throats to inflammatory bowel disease. Native Americans used slippery elm for centuries, both internally and externally. The colonists learned from them and adopted it as a standard remedy. It was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia, the official drug reference, until relatively recently. Then, it just disappeared from medical consciousness. Not because it stopped working, but because you can't patent a tree bark. You can't make billions selling something people can harvest themselves. I keep slippery elm lozenges in my medicine cabinet. At the first sign of throat irritation or stomach upset, that's what I reach for. Not because any doctor told me to, none ever has, but because it works. We're in the home stretch now, and the last 5 plants on this list, they're going to challenge everything you think you know about what medicine can do, including plant number 17, which might be the most surprising of all. Remember when elderberry suddenly got popular during certain respiratory illness seasons? Stores sold out, prices skyrocketed, and then it kind of faded back into obscurity once the panic ended. That's a shame, because elderberry is one of the most potent natural immune modulators we have access to. Elder plants have been used medicinally for thousands of years. Hippocrates called the elder tree his medicine chest, and modern research is proving why. Multiple studies have shown that elderberry extract can reduce the duration and severity of influenza. One randomized controlled trial found that patients taking elderberry syrup recovered 4 days earlier than those taking placebo. That's not a minor improvement, that's clinically significant. But here's what's really interesting. A study published in the Journal of International Medical Research compared elderberry to oseltamivir, that's Tamiflu, the prescription antiviral. The elderberry group showed similar recovery times with fewer side effects. Similar effectiveness to a prescription antiviral from a berry. How does it work? Elderberry contains compounds that appear to prevent viruses from entering host cells and replicating. It also seems to stimulate immune system activity, particularly the production of cytokines that coordinate the immune response. Now, there's been some controversy about elderberry and cytokine storms, the dangerous overreaction of the immune system that can occur with severe infections. The concern is theoretical, and there's no clinical evidence that elderberry actually causes problems. But if you're dealing with a severe respiratory illness, work with a healthcare provider. For everyday immune support, though, elderberry is a powerhouse hiding in plain sight. But if you think elderberry is impressive, wait until you hear about plant number 17. All right, this is the one I've been waiting to tell you about, because this plant might genuinely shock you. Andrographis paniculata is sometimes called Indian echinacea, but that comparison doesn't do it justice. It's been used in Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine for centuries, primarily for respiratory infections, and the research on it is remarkably strong. Here's what I want you to understand. Most cold and flu remedies just manage symptoms. They suppress your cough, dry up your nose, reduce fever. They don't actually help you fight the infection or recover faster. Andrographis appears to do both. A systematic review published in Phytomedicine looked at 33 randomized controlled trials involving over 7,000 patients. The conclusion? Andrographis significantly reduced the duration and severity of upper respiratory tract infections. It was more effective than placebo, and in some studies, more effective than conventional treatments. One study compared andrographis to paracetamol, that's Tylenol, for treating fever and sore throat in pharyngitis patients. Andrographis worked better. A plant worked better than one of the world's most common medications for the very symptoms that medication was designed to treat. Let that sink in. But here's what makes andrographis even more remarkable. It appears to have direct antiviral effects, inhibiting the replication of various viruses, including influenza. It also modulates the immune system in ways that enhance the body's natural defenses. The Scandinavian countries have embraced andrographis. It's a common remedy in Sweden and other Nordic nations. But in the United States, almost nobody has heard of it. Ask your doctor about andrographis, and you'll probably get a blank stare. I started keeping andrographis extract on hand after learning about the research. At the first sign of a cold, that tickle in the throat, that slight achiness, that's what I take. And anecdotally, my colds have become shorter and milder. That's not a clinical claim, but it matches what the research predicts. Sometimes anecdote and evidence align. We're approaching the final stretch now. 3 more plants that address some of the most stubborn problems in human health. Here's something that should make you think differently about your lawn. That yellow flower you've been trying to kill with weed spray? It's one of the most nutritious and medicinally useful plants on Earth. Dandelion has been used in traditional medicine systems worldwide: Chinese, Arabic, Native American, European. Every culture that encountered it recognized its value. And then we decided it was a weed and started poisoning it with chemicals. The leaves are more nutritious than spinach, higher in vitamins A, C, and K, plus minerals like iron, calcium, and potassium. But it's the root that really shines medicinally. Dandelion root is a powerful liver tonic. It stimulates bile production, which is essential for fat digestion and toxin elimination. It appears to have diuretic properties without depleting potassium like pharmaceutical diuretics do. And preliminary research suggests it may even have anti-cancer properties, though that needs much more study. A study on patients with type 2 diabetes found that dandelion root extract significantly reduced blood sugar levels. Another study suggested it might help reduce cholesterol. But here's the beautiful irony. Americans spend billions of dollars on lawn care, much of which goes toward killing dandelions. And then they spend more billions on supplements for liver support, blood sugar control, and digestive aid. The medicine is right there, growing for free. And we poison it because we've been told it doesn't belong on a proper lawn. I haven't sprayed chemicals on my lawn in years. Those dandelions, they go in my salads. The roots get dried for tea. What was once a nuisance became a medicine cabinet. It's like the universe is laughing at us. The healing we seek is literally growing under our feet. 2 more plants to go. And the last one on this list addresses something that affects almost everyone, but is rarely discussed honestly. Let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in the anxiety conversation. What pharmaceuticals actually do to your brain versus what plants do. Benzodiazepines, drugs like Xanax, Valium, Ativan, work by supercharging your GABA receptors. They're incredibly effective at stopping anxiety in its tracks. But they also create dependence, tolerance, and some of the most difficult withdrawal syndromes in all of medicine. Doctors are increasingly reluctant to prescribe them because the exit is so brutal. SSR is Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro have fewer dependence issues but come with their own problems. Sexual dysfunction, emotional blunting, weight gain, and their own withdrawal syndrome that's only recently being acknowledged. What if there was something in between? Something that calmed anxiety without the dependence risk or the emotional flattening? Passion flower has been used for anxiety since the 16th century when Spanish conquistadors discovered it in Peru. And the research, while not as extensive as for pharmaceuticals, is genuinely promising. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacy and Therapeutics compared passion flower extract to oxazepam, a benzodiazepine, for anxiety management. Both were equally effective at reducing anxiety. But the passion flower group had significantly less impairment of job performance. Equal anxiety, relief with less cognitive impairment. That's remarkable. Passion flower appears to work through the GABA system, like benzodiazepines, but much more gently. It doesn't sledgehammer the receptors, it nudges them. The result is a calming effect without the sedation, dependence, or cognitive fog that comes with pharmaceutical GABA modulators. I'm not saying passion flower should replace medication for severe anxiety disorders. If you need medication, take it. But for the everyday anxiety that most of us experience, the racing thoughts, the low-level dread, the overwhelm, passion flower offers an option that respects your brain's natural chemistry. It often comes in combination with valerian for sleep support. Together, they create a gentle, calming effect that helps with both anxiety and insomnia, without the risks associated with pharmaceutical approaches. One plant left, and I saved this one for last, because it perfectly captures everything this video is about. I know what some of you are thinking. Echinacea? The controversial one? The one that studies say doesn't work? Hold on, because the echinacea story is actually a perfect example of how we've gotten plant medicine wrong. Yes, some studies have shown that echinacea doesn't prevent colds or significantly reduce their duration. These studies got a lot of media attention. Echinacea doesn't work became the headline, and many people walked away thinking it was debunked. But here's what those headlines missed. The studies used different species of echinacea, different plant parts, different preparations, and different dosing protocols. Some used the wrong species entirely. Some used doses that practitioners consider subtherapeutic. Comparing all these studies is like saying medicine doesn't work because one study using aspirin failed to treat cancer. When researchers use the right species, Echinacea purpurea or E. angustifolia, the right plant parts, primarily root and aerial parts, the right preparation, standardized extract, and the right dosing, starting at the first sign of infection, the picture changes dramatically. A meta-analysis that controlled for these factors found that echinacea reduced the odds of developing a cold by 58% and reduced the duration of colds by 1 to 4 days. That's not nothing. That's meaningful. The problem isn't that echinacea doesn't work. The problem is that research protocols often didn't match how traditional practitioners actually use it. This is a broader issue in herbal medicine research. Scientists design studies based on pharmaceutical models, standardized doses given over standardized timeframes. But plants don't work like pharmaceuticals. They have complex synergistic compounds. They often need to be used in specific ways, at specific times, in specific preparations. When studies ignore this, they get mixed results. It's like criticizing a hammer for being a bad screwdriver. You're using the tool wrong. Echinacea remains one of the most widely used herbs in America for immune support. Millions of people swear by it. And while the science is imperfect, the centuries of traditional use and the studies that actually match that traditional use suggest there's something real there. Not magic, not a cure-all, but something real. So here we are. 20 plants that heal what modern medicine misses. 20 remedies that have been hiding in plain sight while we've been told there's no alternative to the pharmaceutical approach. Let me be clear about something. I'm not anti-medicine. Modern medicine saves lives. It performs miracles that would have seemed like sorcery 100 years ago. Emergency rooms, antibiotics, surgical techniques, these are genuine achievements of human civilization. But medicine has blind spots. It's great at acute intervention and less interested in chronic support. It excels at diagnosing diseases but often ignores the gray areas where people suffer without meeting diagnostic criteria. It treats symptoms brilliantly while sometimes ignoring root causes. And perhaps most importantly, modern medicine is shaped by economic forces that don't always align with patient welfare. A plant that can't be patented is a plant that won't be promoted, even if it works. These 20 plants fill gaps that the current system leaves open. They address stress and fatigue. They support organs that are quietly struggling. They offer gentle alternatives to harsh pharmaceuticals. They work with the body rather than overriding it. I'm not saying you should throw away your prescriptions and start an herb garden. Please don't do that. What I'm saying is that we've forgotten something important. We've forgotten that healing doesn't have to come only from laboratories and pharmacies. It can also come from roots and leaves and bark that have been doing this work for millennia. Your great-great-grandmother knew some of this. Her knowledge got pushed aside when the pharmaceutical revolution promised better living through chemistry. And while that revolution delivered remarkable things, it also left valuable wisdom by the roadside. Maybe it's time to go back and pick it up. Here's what I want you to take away from this video. These 20 plants aren't alternatives to modern medicine. They're complements to it. They fill the gaps that the current system leaves. They offer options for problems that don't have good pharmaceutical solutions. They work gently, over time, to support the body's own healing mechanisms. But they require something that modern medicine doesn't. They require you to take responsibility for your own health. They require patience because many of them work slowly. They require education because doctors won't tell you about most of them. They require discernment because not every herb is right for every person. That's actually empowering if you think about it. It means your health isn't entirely in the hands of the healthcare system. It means you have options you didn't know you had. It means the wisdom of thousands of years of human experience is still available to you. If this video changed how you think about health and healing, I'd love to know. Leave a comment below and tell me which plant surprised you most. Was it andrographis with its flu-fighting power? Dandelion, the weed that's actually medicine? Something else? I read every comment. Seriously. And if you have questions about any of these plants, drop them below and I'll do my best to respond. Hit the subscribe button if you want more videos that challenge conventional thinking about health. We're just getting started here. There's so much more to explore. More plants, more research, more stories of wisdom that got lost and is now being found again. Your health is your responsibility. The system won't take care of you the way you can take care of yourself. And now you have 20 more tools in your toolkit. Use them wisely, take care of yourself, and remember, the healing you're looking for might just be growing in your backyard. I'll see you in the next one.